All right.
Westworld
Season 3, Episode 1.
Yeah, I'm going to go check out now.
Do you guys want to keep talking about zombie apocalypse movies? I was actually having some fun with that. That was pretty fun. What else do we got?
Anybody seen World War Z?
I did. I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, I thought
I liked the movie more than I liked the book. The book was really boring. In fact, I had a hard time finishing it.
It was a bunch of journal entries.
Yeah.
no
It was rough. It read like a manual,
Jude
but the
hates
movie was
journal
really
entries.
good. I won't read the directions at all.
All right, real quick, we're going to talk about Westworld Season 3, Episode 1, The Return of Dolores.
No spoilers.
It aired.
You better not spoil it.
And
That's like I haven't seen it yet.
I think I really enjoyed this episode. I think it's a solid setup for the season coming forward.
All right, thank you.
Why don't you go to your safe place?
Snowflake.
Snowflake.
I don't even know if I'm going to watch Westworld. I don't really like the chick that plays Dolores.
Yeah, I got to admit.
People give her such a hard time.
She's kind of on my list.
She's
kind of on my list.
I try not to be like that, but when I was watching this episode, the only thing I could think of was her shitting on Kobe Bryant after, like, the day he died, like, he's a rapist and this and that.
Yep.
I'm like, Jesus, Evan Rachel Wood, Jesus, come on. Like, we get it. That's her crusade, and I support her in that as far as, you know, if she feels the need to do that, but I'm like, you gotta know when the right time is. And I did find it a little hard watching this episode. I thought about that a lot when I saw her on screen. And she was by far I think she had the most screen time in this episode. It was all about her. And I do enjoy the character, and I think the storyline that they set up for this episode was pretty solid. And I like where they're going with it as far as her kind of trying to dominate this world and take the strength away from the humans and claim their own kind of rite of passage and destroy the bad people. But I think there's going to be a really cool setup where what's the guy's name from Breaking Bad? Paul something?
Jesse Pinkman.
Aaron Paul.
Jesse Pinkman. Aaron Paul, thank you. Aaron Paul's
Same
character. He's going to...
I thought his character was really interesting.
I did too. I liked it because I can see how he would side with Dolores in her crusade against... Like, he's been beaten down by society, so
right.
He's probably ready for a regime change. And I feel like he's going to side with her once she kind of reveals her ultimate plan to him. But I also kind of see where she might get that not all humans are bad.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of play off of that with that dynamic. And I think that's a really cool setup for this episode.
I really like that they're putting this season in the quote-unquote real world. Mm-hmm. I'm enjoying that dynamic between it's just like a different take on her relationship between her and humans. She and humans. Her and humans. Doesn't matter. No one's listening. I agree with you.
One of the things I like about this show is every season we get kind of like a new aspect to this world that they're creating. So like the first season was all entirely Westworld. Mm-hmm. And the second season we get to see like other aspects of that park where you see like, you know,
behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Well, you see behind the scenes, but you also see like
other worlds within the park,
Samurai World and, you know, stuff like that. And now we're getting to see the real world, quote unquote. But it's really interesting because in the first episode, you know, there's this scene where they're at a party and there's this kind of rich, douchey jerk at this party. You know, he's been drinking and he's been doing drugs and he's one of those guys who's like, dude, like we're all in a simulation, man.
Oh yeah.
And you know, you kind of dismiss it as him being a drunk, douchey asshole, but like knowing the show, it's like, well, wait a minute, because they were talking about like they should put them all in a simulation within the simulation. And when he said that, I was like, oh, is that what we're doing? You know, because with the show, they play with the perception of reality a lot. And so like, you know, you have disjointed timelines, you have like all this, all these different perspectives and, you know, like, what's it mean to be human? What's it mean to be real? What is real?
What is real?
Like, you know, can a simulation be just as real as being real? Like what is the real world? Stuff like that. And, you know, I wouldn't put it past the show to give us a season 3 where we think, you know, all this stuff is happening in the real world. And then all of a sudden it's like a simulation within the Forge, you know, or something like that.
It's just Dolores inside of a computer program.
Yeah.
Something.
She thinks she's in the real world, but it's just another version of the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also, I was telling you earlier that Jonathan Nolan, the guy who, Christopher Nolan's brother, who is the head writer and producer on the show, he did this show called Person of Interest on CBS, which dealt with a lot of these same themes of artificial intelligence, what it means to actually be human, how technology can become godlike and how humans worship technology and stuff like that. And they set up a big thing in this one where they show like the God AI that Dolores is after. And, it was like something right out of that show, Person of Interest. And I was like, I'm interested to see where they're going to go with this.
This is really cool. So if you guys watch the show and you see the opening credits, or you kind of see that ring, and it pops up little spikes, and it says disturbance or something like that. And it says in London,
anomaly
detected or stuff like that. That's actually that main computer. It's never hinted at, really. You kind of have to put these pieces together yourself. But you can kind of tell... it wants to create this perfect cycle of like everything's normal. It's controlling all the algorithms. It's controlling human behavior by knowing when things are going to happen and how to adjust for it. And it's constantly trying to create this perfect, visually, it's trying to create this perfect circle, which in the real world just means that it's like everything's calm and everything's normal. Everybody's kind of complacent. Where things are not going as planned. And it's really cool if you really analyze it. Again, I watched Hacks Dogma's YouTube channel. He breaks all this stuff down really well. And it's a ton of fun to see how much detail really goes into this show. Like every little thing that you see on people's tablets has, if you freeze frame it and read what's on there, there's like little hints to what's going on. And the same thing goes for this.
Yeah. The great thing about the show is it is classic hard science fiction. Like it's not Star Wars-y, timey-wimey, space, whatever. Like the people who do this show actually care about the world that they're crafting and the characters that are in it and the technology that's in it. And they take the time to sit down and flesh out these little details. And it's something, and it surprises me that this is a Bad Robot production, because that's the type of thing that Bad Robot just isn't known to do. But I think Jonathan Nolan
cares. He seems to care.
He comes from that Christopher Nolan school of filmmaking where it's like, let's take this seriously, and it pays off in the show.
I agree. It does definitely. It helps build the world out to where, for people who like us, who like diving into that type of thing, you can dive into it, and there are answers to the questions that you have, even if they're like obscure, weird questions that not a normal audience member would ask. If you were like, "Hey, I'm curious about how this works," and you dive into it, it's all there. It's all thought out, which is it's not the normal thing we see nowadays from entertainment. People usually just like surface level stuff, and then once you dive deeper, it kind of doesn't make any sense anymore.
I think the show gets a bad rap because it does do a lot of delayed payoffs where they set up all these really intriguing questions, and people just kind of want to know the answers right away. And they're like, "This show's stupid. It's confusing. They don't tell you anything." But if you're patient and you realize that these are answers that are going to be coming somewhere down the line, it's actually a very intriguing show.
Yeah. I remember the maze in season 1. The maze was a huge blank, question mark for a lot of people. And I think some people may have not been very satisfied with the answer that they got, although the answer that they got made sense in the subject of the show. And I was like, man, I love the show, although I do find it hard to follow sometimes, which is why I watch a bunch of YouTube videos about it, just to kind of get my head around it, which definitely helps. But Jude, what did you think about this episode besides the relationships? What do you think about the world that they're going forward and where this season's taking us?
Well, I think it's the way that they develop their worlds for the viewer, at least for me. It makes me feel like I am placing my trust in this world, and how do I describe this? Like, it makes me feel like it's a safe place to place my trust in investing in this world. Because a lot of times you'll watch something and then you'll be invested in it, and then you'll be like, wait a minute.
It was all a waste of time.
This doesn't make any sense.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
There'll be like a major flaw in something, and you'll be like, wait, this doesn't make any sense. This goes against like a bunch of shit that 3 seasons was a law, and now all of a sudden that doesn't matter. But with this show, it feels like everything's in place, and you can just fully put yourself in the epicenter of this show and just kind of invest in it and just see where it takes you. And it as for me, like just as a viewer, it just feels like a really safe place to invest in.
Yeah,
You feel comfortable watching the show.
I feel like they're not going to like pull the rug out from underneath me and be like, oh, that shit doesn't matter now because we're in a hurry to wrap things up.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this show is that they actually take like an entire year to like write the scripts for every episode before they start filming, because that was a big thing after I think in the middle of the first season, they put the show on hiatus for production. And the reason for that was because they were like, we want to really get the scripts, completed and ready to have everything make sense. And then after that, for season two got delayed by 2 years because they're like, we want to really take our time with the scripts. And, you can argue whether or not that paid off for season 2. But I think like in watching season 1 and season 2, like in a binge format, like it definitely pays off because like they actually took the time to care about what they were writing.
Yeah, and that's the difference between like delaying things for Westworld versus delaying things for Game of Thrones. Like the payoff for Game of Thrones was like, what the f*** did they spend their money on?
Time.
What did they waste their time with?
Yeah.
That whole last season was a shit show and a joke.
And it took like 3 years to come out, right?
Yeah. Versus with Westworld, it's just like, oh, okay, I'm all right with this because they took their time and they made it better.
Yeah, I can definitely. There's a huge difference between the writing quality, for sure, and I can see that, and it comes off on in the show itself. It like you said, it makes you feel like, okay, I can invest my time.
Yeah.
And because we got burned. I mean, I don't think there's a single person out there who didn't feel like they got burned from season 8 of Game of Thrones. I mean, it was like
you'd be surprised.
10 years in the I'm sure there's people. I'm sure I get it. Like 10 years in the making, and then like the season 8, you're like, well, that's it. That's what we got. Like, really? And I really hope that this show doesn't do it. I don't know how many seasons they have planned or how long it's going to take Dolores to take over the world, but I certainly hope that they continue this trend. And I know that the wait times between seasons is ridiculous, but I mean, as long as they keep delivering.
If it's worth it, then it's worth it.
Yeah, if it's worth it, then fine. Do what you got to do. But it is irritating.
And if Kadish is on board with the writing, then
he's going to be our guy.
At some point, they're going to have to speed things up, right?
Nope.
Because
we're all just sitting at home.
Well, they'll end up running into a problem like they do with Data on Star Trek. Because Evan Rachel Wood's going to get old.
Well, they'll just put her in a new body.
Oh yeah, they could do that. Just swap the
new actress.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Swap the bodies.
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels between Westworld and Altered Carbon.
There are. Yeah.